I think so.
Yeah.
I should be her agent. If she,
Yeah.
when she makes
We
it
were just
big,
talking about
I'm getting a
agents.
cut, right? Oh, really? What are we talking about agents? I've got the best one.
You have the best one?
The best one in all of agency, yes, for sure.
Let's just talk about being back here. I know it's a place that College GameDay likes to come. Just talk about just being at Rupp and why you guys like to come.
I think any time that a program or a team is as important to the fans as Kentucky basketball is to these fans, I mean, that sort of permeates everything you do. And you can sense it through the crowds at the show. I was saying to a couple of people from Kentucky earlier today, there is one place on earth that would put 23,000 in for a pregame show 11 hours before tip-off, as their fans did, and that's here. No other place on earth would do that, and I think it's awesome. I mean, I use this line all the time. Kentucky fans love to look at the rest of college basketball and go, we're Kentucky and you're not. And you know, I think it's really cool. That's why I come here.
This Kentucky team is a little different than the ones in the past because, as Jay was saying, there's maybe not a defined star. There's just a lot of good players. What do you see from this team?
I think it's the epitome of sort of being spoiled by terrific success, because there are, and look, Kentucky should measure itself by being excellent and winning championships. I understand that. But there are a lot of teams that would kill for having all these just really good players. You know, there's no #1 overall draft pick or some such thing. So, look, they've still got time to grow. I think this year that in college basketball, you've seen that maybe there aren't teams that are invincible the way the Kentucky team almost was a few years ago. Went to the Final Four undefeated at that point. So I don't think there's any team like that. So the good news is this may be more of an opportunity for this Kentucky team to grow and evolve and make sure I had my years right. 14, right, when an 8 seed and went to the Final Four, I think. So there may be more of that type of opportunity for this team to continue to improve and gel and listen to Cal and sometimes not listen to Cal and figure out when they should, when they shouldn't, and evolve and become a Final Four type team. I mean, they've got a long way to go for sure, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
What kind of things can you tell us about tomorrow that you guys have planned for the show? I know you guys always do big things.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things I think that are going to be fun. One, Jay Williams went to Norman and spent time with Trae Young, so I'm looking forward to seeing that when he gets back. In fact, it's on his way here now. So there'll be a good conversation between those two guys. Former player of the year and a guy who, at least at this point, looks as if he will be a leading candidate, if not a slam dunk for player of the year. We're also going to have a Wheel of Fortune type moment where we're going to spin the wheel, we're going to have teams on it, and then we're going to tell you how deep into the tournament they go. Wherever the spinner lands, we'll talk about. And you know, as long as Cal doesn't oversleep, he's supposed to be on the show too, so that'll be fun.
Did you see Coach Greenberg's rant on Wednesday, and did you think,
I try not to see Seth until I have to, so typically I have to see him on Friday afternoons, and before then I try to avoid him. No, I'm just kidding. And look, Seth is a really, really passionate guy, and he's really plugged in. I joked to him that he's really missing out on a financial bonanza. If he could just collect the normal psychologist fee from Calipari and Izzo for being their personal shrinks and dealing with all of their team's problems, he would be flying around on private jets and eating caviar all the time, I think.
You mentioned that in college basketball this year, there's not one team that is standing out to be the team. Do you think the parity in college basketball is a good thing? Do you like it?
You'll Paul Billis in here, you sort of have to define parity. I'm not sure that there is necessarily parity. I still think that there are a pretty select group of teams who would be more likely to win the national championship. I just don't know if that number is, as small as it was the year, Kentucky and Duke, went to the Final Four and Wisconsin made it to the championship game. Those teams sort of set themselves significantly apart. I'm not sure the gap is that wide this year is all I really mean by that. But I think it's entertaining for the fans if they feel like that it doesn't necessarily take a Herculean effort out of their team, and maybe if somebody drop kicks one just right and it falls in at the buzzer, that you might get lucky and knock off Kentucky. I think that is more entertaining for the fans on the one side. On the other side, I tend to think that it's good for the sport if you have a behemoth that everybody's after. I mean, how much fun was that year when Kentucky was trying to go undefeated and everybody was taking their shot at it to see if they could get it done. I think a standard bearer in a sport is good, and we have really good teams this year. And I don't know that we have that necessarily that one team that's a standard bearer, so it's just a different type of entertainment.
This matchup between Kentucky and Florida, what do you think is going to make it an exciting, enjoyable matchup?
I think, first of all, these two teams have dominated the SEC. They've become great rivals. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see how well Florida shoots from three. When they shoot it well, they win, and when they don't, they lose. And so they haven't been able to find many ways to win outside of that. They too are continuing to grow just like Kentucky is. So I think when these two play, there's always intensity because of the way they've dominated the championships in the league in recent years. And you know, Florida has done a couple of times what Kentucky's only been able to do once, you know, in the last decade or so, is win a national championship. So I think that there's, you know, I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to say threatening the throne, but, you know, that Florida has ascended to the mountaintop that Kentucky sort of feels as if it's rightfully theirs, you know, a couple of times. So I think that always, even though the cast of characters are different and you know, Billy's not here anymore and stuff, I still think that there's some of that feeling between the two programs. It makes it a fun environment. I think that our researchers said the only matchup that GameDay has been to more often than Kentucky and Florida is Carolina and Duke. So I think that gives you a pretty good indication of where this rivalry stands.
You kind of diagnosed Florida earlier with, you know, saying if they shoot threes, they win. If they don't, they lose. With Kentucky being so young and inconsistent, is there a diagnosis for this team?
I think just, you know, be locked in and listen to Cal a little bit more. I joked earlier about knowing when not to listen. That was more about the criticism. You need to let go in one ear and out the other. But what I think, if you look at the Ken Pomeroy experience rankings, they're the fourth least experienced team. Look, I know Kentucky's had a ton of freshmen around here, but there always seems to have been some veteran presence. Even if it wasn't someone who started, there was some veteran presence around that could kind of help them navigate things during, especially this portion of the season, where, you know, it's a little bit, gets a little bit methodical, a little bit rote. You're going from this game to this game to this game and maintaining the type of intensity that you need. I think you know, obviously they're looking, they've had elite level guard play in recent years, and, you know, then probably, you know, in terms of league guard, maybe it's not quite what it's been, but that's a pretty high standard, you know, that you're setting up there too. It's not as if to say their guard play is not great. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying it's been so good, you know, with Fox and those guys in recent years that it makes it more difficult. And this team is kind of progressing, I think, at a more normal rate. And so maybe by February we'll be sitting here saying Kentucky is the standard bearer. But I think where we are right now is you just have a team that is going to be up and down a little bit because of their lack of experience and trying to find a way to make sure all the pieces fit the way they should.
You think not having a senior caps their ceiling?
Beg your pardon?
You think not having a senior presence caps their ceiling?
No, because young teams have one. But I think sometimes it's easier if you have, you know, it doesn't even have to be a senior, but just somebody who's, you know, been around for a few years that also happens to have leadership qualities, whether that's, you know, think of like Guy Hawkins, you know, that was around forever and would come in key moments and sometimes do the difficult things. You know, he understood how things worked. And I'm not saying that these guys don't understand how things work, but it's normal. They're young, you know, and they're figuring it out. And I think, you know, a little patience will go a long way with this team. The fellow on the bench knows what he's doing. He's had pretty good success.
Awesome.
All right.